Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Future of BizTech. I am your host, JC Granger, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Casey Hill, who is the CMO of DoWhatWorks. Casey, tell us a little bit about what does the company do and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me, JC. My name's Casey. I'm the CMO at DoWhatWorks. What DoWhatWorks does is we have a technology that can see any A/B test done by any brand on the web. So when someone wants to run a split test, they want to know, should I include customer logos on my website or should I not? And they want to test it. We essentially can detect that. We have a web crawler, looks across. We just use public information, so there's no cooking or anything, shady going on. We use public data and we essentially track those tests and then we add it into a database once the brand has chosen what version they're essentially going to keep. And then we look at that at scale. So for example, someone might look in and say, hey, I'm redesigning my website and I want to know, should I have one CTA or two CTAs right at the top in my hero section? They can go to their industry, say B2B SaaS, and look at 800 tests that have been done from brands, and they can say, this is what Slack did, this is what Monday did, this is what Klaviyo did, and they can go through a long list of looking at those experiments and understanding that trend at scale. So the idea there is to help people run more effective tests and to have less of kind of what is often the turn wheel of like people keep running tests, but they're often losing.
Yeah.
So that's essentially a little bit about the company at a very high level. My name is Casey. I've been in the space for 15 years, B2B SaaS world for 15 years. I've spent most of that in SMB MarTech and have made the transition up to DoWhatWorks as more of an enterprise focused brand. So that's been a fun journey making that kind of shift. Besides working across a handful of different tech companies, I also teach. So I've taught at Stanford around new demand gen, and I've also taught at UCSD around the evolution of content marketing. And have built some kind of courses and done some other things on the educational front as well. So that's kind of a very quick overview of DoWhatWorks and me.
Nice. So it sounds like what the system does is it kind of pulls from the legacy and all the history of everything else, so they kind of give your clients a shortcut, right? Because obviously, if these other companies have put in this time and money to split test things, they're everyone's kind of split testing the same stuff in general, right? There might be little different details, but it allows your clients to pull from the collective historical nature of what has and already hasn't worked, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think there's just a lot of things that people don't inherently know off the bat. Like, as an example, I launched an e-commerce company in 2019. And when I first launched that, I had poor conversion on my checkout page. And one of the things I realized was that for international markets, having alternative ways to pay besides credit cards was a huge variable. And as soon as I added the pay by PayPal, pay by Apple, like the alternative ways to pay, my conversion rate went up overnight. So that's a perfect example of something that someone might not know. They might not have that intelligence. You're just a business owner, you have your skill set, you come out there. And then if you can just see that, you can see all of that intelligence off the bat, you save yourself all of that missed opportunity time, as well as maybe going through 4 to 5 test iterations before you land on what's actually working.
Well, how much time and money do you think it saves companies on average? Because, like you said, I mean, there's a lot of time it would take to split test from scratch on your own. So, what have you found as far as, does it save them 2 months, 3 months, 2 weeks? Does it save them $100,000, $10,000? Like, just what numbers have you seen where the benefit is like nuts to bolts?
Yeah, for sure. So we work again with enterprise companies, some of the largest streaming services that exist out there, some of the largest banks, some of the largest fintech, some of the largest B2B SaaS. So as one example, we had a company that shifted from that 1 to 2 CTA model. And by doing that, had like a 1.6% lift that correlated to millions and millions of dollars over the course of 12 months, right? Because that was actually in their hero, like right off the bat. So that's just one example. Like these companies at scale, if you move stuff even 0.5% on a key behavior that's tied to revenue, the impact of that is huge. So in our dashboard, we actually have something that says like running this many tests yourself would have cost X dollars. And we actually have a calculation that actually shows them that exact thing. But definitely for companies that are operating at scale, the impact could be huge on revenue or whatever the key behavior they're trying to optimize for is.
That's awesome. So you're the CMO. You've come in somewhat recently. What to your knowledge was kind of the beginning origins of this company? What did the founder like? Why did they start this? And what were some of those kind of maybe early hurdles that you are aware of that I'm sure come up in meetings and war stories, right?
For sure. So they're executives from Meetup. So they were part of Meetup that essentially exited for like $200 million, and they were basically both my founder and then our CTO were both worked at Meetup at the time. And I think the problem they saw, which is I think again a common problem out there, is just a lot of volume of testing, but not a lot of output from those tests. Right? It's like you're testing, you're testing, you're testing, and it takes you 20 tests before you land on one that really makes a big dent. And all the while, you spent a lot of resources and a lot of time through those 8 months of ineffective testing to land on that win. So I think that was
Mm.
the problem that they detected. And then I think discovering that there was this ability to build technology that essentially could from pull this from public data, that I think was a huge win and kind of take away from where they wanted to build the tech. And so that was the origin. They came from Meetup after the company had essentially been acquired. Then that was the transition over to them going and starting DoWhatWorks, and kind of building out this technology.
Okay, cool. So what are the kind of maybe the current hurdles you guys are doing? Like, I mean, it's all rainbows and unicorns in our head, but then like the reality, of course, never works out that way. And you're in kind of a unique position because obviously if you're being brought in at all, you're being brought in to grow the company. You don't bring in a CMO unless you're like, okay, let's rock, right? So what kind of walls did you hit or are you hitting right now? And then how are you working on those for the company?
Yeah, great question. So when I came in, one of the first things I wanted to do was massively expand the content apparatus. This was kind of a content marketer's dream. I have a couple channels. My LinkedIn, for example, does about 10 million views per year. So I had some large distribution channels that I had coming in. And when I looked at this company, I was like, this is great because like no one has this data. Like we're going to share these tests from what Disney's doing, insert a whole series of big companies, right? And this is data that is proprietary, unique stuff that we could put out there. So I started doing that right away, sharing tests, sharing insights, and it was great. Like our traffic already tripled within the first quarter. So we were
Wow.
able to provide a very quick ramp directly from LinkedIn as a distribution source. And then we started dabbling in like getting on some webinars, doing some podcasts, doing different newsletter inclusions. I would say the first kind of hurdle is kind of like the diversification component, meaning that like we found some things that are really working well. Like LinkedIn is really working well. The question is now organic LinkedIn. So the question now is, do we go paid and do we try to like double down on what's working organically and do we invest more heavily there? Do we try to find a second land vector? So we've kind of established one of these land vectors. It's working well, but now I think this idea is how do we continue to add more dimensions to that? The other thing is, it's a little bit of an interesting and tricky space in that when people first hear about it, one of the first reactions, this is one of the things even when I first heard about it, I was like, before someone explained it, it kind of seems black hat. It's like, how do you have that data? Well, what do you mean you
Yeah.
know what they do? How do you know what wins? So there's an education hurdle for us to walk through and explain, like, hey, we're not cooking. This is how we look at it. This is how we gather the data. The second part is companies aren't necessarily happy if you publish those tests, right? Like imagine that you're Chase Bank and I'm like, hey, this is what Chase Bank's doing. Chase Bank maybe doesn't want to share what Chase Bank is doing, right? And so although that's public data and we have the ability to do it, there's a little bit of this, we have to be careful to not step on toes, and
Sure.
make people angry or frustrated.
Yeah,
Not
because
necessarily.
if you piss off a big enough company, they can get creative with lawyers and or even just change how their data gets out there, right? So it's kind of like there's a fine line to walk there. I mean, you can be right. That doesn't make it work out necessarily though, right?
Totally. And so that's one of the reasons why the most successful content series I've run so far is called like blank is the only company I've seen doing this. And I highlight something positive that a brand is doing, like some really creative solution that they've had. And that's been great because it's driven 3 million, close to 3 million views so far. So huge reach, but companies love it. Like if you come to a company and you're like, hey, I talked about how this thing you're doing with your logo bar, tying it to your case studies is super creative and it has 100,000 views. They pick it up, they reshare it, they internally
Yeah.
Slack it around. And so now it's the opposite reaction. Instead of it feeling kind of shady, I just focus on the positive output. Instead of
Yeah, you
saying,
promote
you
it.
test, yeah, you tested A versus B, I just say, hey, look at what they're doing with B that won, and this is why it's great. And then it creates a much more positive. It's just like, oh, hey, they're just highlighting our brand, essentially.
Well, I mean,
And
you're
so
also showing appreciation, and I think where a lot of issues come is just there's a lot of egos involved, right? And people don't want to share their toys, but if you tell them that their toy's really cool, they're like, here you go, you can play with it too now, right? Like we're
Yeah,
all just kids in a sandbox, at the end of the day, right? The rules are the same. We just got taller,
yeah,
So
totally.
let's talk about what are you guys doing for yourselves to get the word out there? I mean, you're doing podcasts. Obviously, you're on this one. I know you've done other ones. You obviously have a big reach on your own LinkedIn, but like specifically, because I know the audience, there might be someone out there that's either in the similar industry or they just are interested in, how does a successful company grow itself? What are you putting into place? And what are your kind of your goals in those 12-month goals? Like, what are you trying to get to, and how are you doing it?
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of goals, we kind of follow the somewhat generic T2, D3. Like we're in early kind of stages. And so the idea is you try to triple, triple, double, double in terms of like specific revenue targets, but more meaningfully in terms of like the actual tactics or strategies that we're doing. I'm very bullish on distribution first. So what does distribution first mean? So the example I just shared, where I highlight something positive about that other brand and I build content that they inherently want to share, they want to distribute. The philosophy is when you build content, is there a built-in reason for other people to distribute your content for you? And if you do that across the board, I find you get a way larger aperture at where that content goes out to. And before here, I worked at Active Campaign and I ran their influencer motion as well as the video team. And as part of that, it was the exact same thing. I would build a video and I would feature four top AI marketing tools to do XYZ. And so we would include our tool, but we would include these really high quality polished videos of other teams as well. And by doing that, you had built-in distribution. You publish that, and those teams go and distribute it. The shift in thinking that got me a really important breakthrough was in the olden days, I used to always go to the teams and say, hey, I want to build this thing. Will you help me promote it? Will you help me distribute it? And that was always slow. Big teams never, they don't respond back. Instead, what I strongly encourage folks to do, which has been very effective, is just go ship the thing. Go build the great video. And when you show them a video and it has a great walkthrough of their product and it's high quality, they will distribute it then. But if you
Yeah.
go the opposite way and you just wait for permission, then you're going to be hamstringed. So I think the biggest thing is build with a distribution first mindset and go and just ship the good content, ship the good videos, ship the good profiling, and then share it after you've done it. That
Mhm.
is what's going to open the doorways for you to have more success. So that distribution mindset applies to building of internal assets, our blog, our newsletter, our own podcasts, our own webinars, as well as external content we build. We try to construct everything with that idea of why would multiple people share this thing?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, I mean, this podcast, right? Like, I'll share it, but I'm going to tag you in it, and then you like it, so then you're going to share. Like, my half my distribution just comes from the guests sharing the podcast anyway, because obviously they want to. Like, why wouldn't they, right? So
Totally.
no, I relate to that. Are you doing a big podcasting? Are you trying to get on a bunch of podcasts? Are do you guys do your own internal PR for that? Do you outsource it? Like, what are you doing? Because you got great camera presence. You're a good talker. So like, how are you doing that and getting out there yourself when it comes to this?
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny. Back in 2021, I was working at a company called Bonjoro, and that was our major growth lever. I myself was on 150 podcasts in a 12-month period. So it was literally
Jeez.
almost a podcast every single day, right? Like every other day. So spend a lot of time in that motion and absolutely see the utility. I argue to folks that if you're going to do it, I think the play is to do it from a saturation standpoint in a specific niche. So I don't think if you're like, hey, I'm going to try podcasting, I'm going to hop on one or two podcasts this month or even this quarter, it's going to work. That's not been my experience.
Yeah, you go hard in the paint or you don't go at all, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Like you want people to hear you here, hear you here, hear you here. I also am bullish on all sizes of podcasts. Some people are like, I'm only going to go on a top 1% podcast. And you can see ranking, there's like listen notes and other things out there. But my experience has been some of our best performance on the long tail side was you get in early, right? Your episode number 5, your episode number 8, and that can still build from there in the long form. So sure, like don't turn down going on a top 1% podcast, but I would also encourage people to see the utility in some of those smaller shows as well, because they can build over time and you get that long tail piece. I actually taught a whole guesting unit in my Stanford course specifically around podcast guesting. I built like a whole course. So we do it all internally, right? I haven't done a ton of that recently because to be candid, I get a lot of inbound. The vast majority of appearances that I do now are people that reach out to me. So I've had to pitch a lot less, which has been great.
Sure.
Um, but if you are going to pitch, one of the things that I used to do in the past is I would use a tool like Listen Notes. I would have a couple key terms that I would use to search and find podcasts. On the paid version, you get contact information. So you could actually send a pitch out to those folks. And then I would break it down into like three sections. So the first opening section is like you watch an episode of the show and you give them some specific context that is related to something you saw in that. So if they had a really interesting conversation around SMS marketing, right? I would try to link that to, hey, it's funny, one of my close friends actually runs an SMS tool called Sales Messenger out of San Francisco, blah, blah, blah. Like I would create some tie-in. Then I would try to have a very specific reason it would be valuable to their audience. So it's kind of like the authority piece, but I'd try to make sure that it was tied to the audience. The final part, which I personally think is really important as someone who also runs podcasts, is I would give 2 to 3 very specific recommendations of what the episode could be about, like a topic that I could flush out in detail. I think giving specific recommendations, especially for these podcasts that get a bunch of pitches, it shortchanges it. They don't have to like read and be like interpreting. You can say like, hey, we are using AI to do X, Y, and Z, and we've seen a 300% increase in blank, blank, blank. If they're a podcast that cares about that, let's say they're a podcast that covers AI go-to-market strategies, suddenly that's something that's valuable to them. So if you're going to go the podcast route, that would be a way I'd approach it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've always said that, when the podcaster or any publication is done, like that's it, to move on to the next thing. So it's on the guest to extract as much from that momentum as possible. Like I've been on TV stuff and news and I've done podcasts and radio shows, but they move on the next day or the next hour to the next thing. So it's my job to like grab that content and do it. So I guess my question is, you were on a like 150 podcasts in one year, but that's so many that I can't imagine that you yourself maximized all the things you could do from the marketing from those things. So what is your strategy? Do you have like a team that you say, hey, okay, here's the podcast I was on. Go chop that up. Go get it into audio, into video, into written. Like what's your strategy of what you do? Because that's so many podcasts. I can't imagine you have the time to distribute to the maximum effectiveness of that content. So how did you do that?
Yeah, that's an absolutely great question. So a couple different things at different kind of stages, right? So at Active Campaign, we also did a lot of podcasts, and we had someone on the team who helped follow up with all of those shows and get the specific pieces of information that we would need to do the distribution in the right way, right? So sometimes that's like, hey, can I get an MP4 file of this specific thing? Like, hey, can you chop up this thing for me? Hey, we'll include it in the newsletter, but we saw that you shared these 3 clips. We really need this clip. So we had someone on the team who would help basically hunt those down, help make sure we stayed organized on when everything was even releasing. Because once you start to do volume, right, you might not even know everything like when it goes out. Some hosts might follow up really well, might not. So absolutely, having a point person who can help find those right things, I think is super valuable. The other thing I'll say is figuring out how you can build the relationship side is super valuable. So there's a handful of things that we tested over time, depending on the match or relevance of the host. Sometimes it's like, hey, if I gave you $500 to promote this episode, would you run an ad to that? And usually the people are like, yeah, that's awesome. Like I'm happy to run. Like they get more views. You get a third party that promotes some point that you want to get across, and it doesn't have to come from your brand. So like that's one way you can do it. Another way is like, hey, I'd love to do a feature where we do a call out in our newsletter about what you guys are doing. And then you maybe get your episode, but maybe another episode that you kind of pull in there. Like different ways that you can work that relationship capital is also super valuable. It opens up doors for you to support each other. And then the simplest one that I found is just finding guests for them. If you have a perfect match for the show, once you really know the host, I've done those intros all the time. And it's like, it's a beautiful win-win. Because from your network, you're getting someone from your network onto a good fit podcast. So your network's happy. But the hosts, if you find a good person, it's all about having like that top tier person. Don't just recommend your friends who, aren't top tier. But if you have a network of truly A tier operators, right, then awesome. Like usually the host is more than happy to get that introduction. So I would just say, number one, have a person to help on your team to like follow up and make sure that you're doing everything you can. And the second thing is to make sure you lean into the relationship side of it.
That's good advice. I like that. let's talk about the future, right? But I want to bring it back to the company and the technology. So, you mentioned it's like, hey, it's not black hat, right? Like, there's a way that this is out there. We're finding it. So, first off, is there anything you could tell us about specifically how you find it? And then also, where do you see the technology of what you're doing going in the next couple years? Like, what maybe new abilities do you think that will evolve from this, and how will you guys evolve with it?
Yeah, for sure. So in terms of the technology, like I said, it's based on like when someone runs a split test, that there's variance, right? When someone runs those tests that essentially can just be detected by a web crawler that goes through and looks at that information. So I even myself don't know all of the like technical afterwards, but I know essentially that's how it's found and then how it's essentially detected. And we have a human research team that essentially monitors those tests and then declares a test once they've kept a new version for a certain duration of time, right? So it's like I tested A versus B. I decided B was the winner. And now 3 months out, 6 months out, I'm still using B. Okay, that's a good signal that B was the preferred version. So I think that's on that side. In terms of where it's going to evolve, I think there's a lot of pieces, but with the advent of AI and with agents, I think two things are going to happen. Number one, I think the interface and how you interact with these things is going to change. So right now, we're like a conventional B2B SaaS product. Someone comes into our database, we got the toggles, you can search for a specific company, you can search by an industry. But I think the next level is you're just going to talk with it. You're just going to chat with it. You're going to say, hey, I'm about to run a test. And do you have any data around XYZ? And you're just going to ask that question, and the database will automatically curate that output for you. It'll say, yeah, we have 140 tests based on that thing that you asked. And then you might ask a follow-up, okay, but what if we're doing this and this and this? Is how many relevant tests? Okay, we have 72 tests now, right? And it will help whittle you and have that interactive experience. So it has access to the data and it presents that. The other thing is, right now, we provide the intelligence, but all the execution side is still done by wherever they run their website. We just tell you what to do. We don't actually do it for you. But I think the future is you're going to have agents that not only can gather information, but they can actually go do the thing too. So, like,
Yeah.
let's say one versus two CTAs, it could go look at the data, build something that matches your brand guide because all those parameters are already set up in it. And then all you have to do is literally, it'll pop that up to you and it'll be like, this is the new version. Do you like it? And you'll just literally click either yes or you'll give it feedback. No, I don't like it because I want this button to be rounded, not square. They'll say, cool, go back, give you the new version, and you'll click go. Right. And so I think that is where we're shifting towards. There is one other aspect I think is really important that I want to emphasize for folks, though, because when people hear this, one of the things I hear sometimes, they're like, well, Casey, like, isn't this just getting everyone to do the same thing? Like, is this like the death of creativity? Like, we all just start copying each other? And it's a really good question. And I think where I draw the nuance is I think there's things that it absolutely makes sense on your website to be creative about, right? Your style, your colors, your voice, your visuals. But there's also stuff that is just logistical. Like I use the example of my e-commerce business and how we had that problem of not giving people multiple ways to pay. That's just a logistical thing, right? Like it's just a best practice for you to give people more ways to pay. That's not a spot you want to get creative with. Similarly with like language on the CTAs. That's something that I've seen time and time again. Just be clear, just be direct. If it's book a demo, say book a demo. If it's talk to this person on our team, if it's see pricing, just say what it is. There's experiments where people will run a CTA that says like elevate your marketing or like some general term. And whenever people test those, they almost always lose in direct A/B testing. So once again, I don't think that is the place to be creative. I think when it comes to your CTA text, just tell people what you do and be clear. So I think the breakdown is there's all these logistical parts of your website. And then there's these things that are creative, and it's those logistical parts of your website that I think you want to learn from other people, and you want to make sure that you're using best practice, you're not leaving money on the table. And for the creative stuff, absolutely. Keep being creative. Keep having your unique visuals, your brand mascot, like all of that is great. I don't think those are binary. Those don't have to
Sure.
exclude each other.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've given a lot of great advice on this podcast already. So my next question is actually, what is the best advice you've ever been given? Right? Like, did you have like a mentor early on, or did you just hear something that was just so profound at a conference or something? You're really good at this advice. I just want to know like who was good at giving it to you, and what was that golden piece if you wanted to share that with the audience.
Yeah, great question. So I did have a mentor when I was younger. His name was Patrick Campbell. He sold his business profit well for $200 million to a company called Paddle. And we used to meet on a monthly basis. And he was a great creative marketer. And so I was always trying to pick his brain. And I remember one thing that always stuck with me. He was running something called drops. So he did all of these super creative things where he did custom shoes. He made playing cards that were like of the personas for the people he's trying to target. So it was like
Oh,
sentimental.
that's cool.
He did all these super creative things, custom bought gift boxes. But what he told me is he said, I start out my like a channel, a play like this. He said with 7 drops. If I'm at 2 drops and the first two complete flop, I'm still doing 7 drops because I've scoped this out and I understand the way that creative plays work. I need to have enough swings at bat to have a solid chance. And I've adopted that philosophy in a lot of aspects of what I do. It doesn't mean just like stick with things that don't work forever, but it means you go into it with a philosophy of saying, like, I'm going to launch a podcast. I'm going to do 8 episodes. I'm going to do a season and I'm going to see how that kind of comes together. I'm going to do these 4 creative swings. I'm going to plan to do all 4 of those creative swings and see then what the output is. To me, there's something about going into it knowing that you're going to have more swings at bat that's really important. And I always tell people this, like my LinkedIn, as I noted, does about 10 million views per year. Every single week, I put out posts that get 1,000 views, 2,000 views, these total flop posts, right? I know that is part of the equation. And at the same time, every week I put out posts that get 25,000, 50,000 views. If I only did one post per week, then like, let's say like in a given week, I post 6 times and 3 of those are complete flops. Like it would take me so long to get the signal because if I had 3 flops in a row, I'm just like, oh, that thing doesn't work at all. When in fact, it can be really effective. And just to
Yeah.
drill this point all the way home, that series I told you with 3 million views, the first one I did for a brand I think called like Kit got 2,000 views. The second one on Clay got 580,000 views. Right.
Oh, wow.
So if you launch that, I'm like, I'm going to launch this series. I launch it. Oh, it didn't work. This format doesn't work. That's the wrong signal because I didn't dedicate myself to have enough swings at bat to really get to see whether it was going to work or not. So that's I thought a big piece of advice I took from Patrick, and I think is good for folks to take into consideration with their marketing.
I love that, and I 100% agree. So I think maybe let's cap it there. That's a great way to end it. Where can people find you personally? Because I mean, obviously, you get a big presence, so make sure you get the LinkedIn info. And then where can they find the company if they just want to go kick the tires and see what it's all about?
Yeah, totally. So Casey Hill, you can find me on LinkedIn, the one that works at DoWhatWorks. And then DoWhatWorks.io is our website. So if you guys want to hop in, we have a newsletter that drops unique insights and A/B tests every single Thursday. And if you want to see the platform, we obviously can give you a demo too. So you can get that all from the website.
Awesome. And for everyone else out there listening, thank you again for listening to another episode of the Future of Biz Tech. Hey, if you liked what you heard from myself or Casey today, give it a 5-star rating, share it, like it, all that good stuff, because that is how tech nerds like us can find cool podcasts like this. Casey, thank you so much for being on the show, and I look forward to taking a look at the split test. I'm gonna go split test my website now. We got to check it out.
I love it. Thanks, JC, for having me.
All right, bye bye.